Okay. Okay, so I think we're going to go ahead and start. Thank you all for coming into this breakout session. So I have here with me Paula Gluzman, who's representing Spivey Consulting. She is not only an amazing, amazing person, but also one of the most professional people that I have had the pleasure in being acquainted with. And she has so much experience, not only in writing personal statements, helping students from all different backgrounds and trying to achieve their goals for applying to law schools. But she has experience being on committees. And hopefully you can correct me, Paula. I want to make sure that I'm representing that correctly. But yeah, she's just really excited to be here. I know she can't be here in person. She's in California right now. But we're very grateful for her time. I think she can hear you all. So let's give a round of applause to Paula.
Thank you, everyone. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Can I get like a thumbs up in the air if that is yay? Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for having me. I am probably a tiny little thumbnail photo at the top of that screen. I don't know if you all can see me because I'm about to start the presentation, but I have been involved with UCLI now for 2 years, specifically with their fellowship program. And last year, when I heard about the symposium happening, I had like a slight internal jealousy that I couldn't be a part of it and couldn't be there with all of you. So when I was invited this year to join in as one of the speakers, I was delighted. We are going to be talking today about one of my favorite topics, which is the personal statement. And it's not just about composing a compelling personal statement, but in this day and age with the way that admissions is operating and the way that the applications are being written, it's really about your diversity / perspective experience essays. So we're going to be talking about both because it's really hard to talk about one without acknowledging the other. So let's go ahead and get started. Today we're going to cover the purpose of both the personal statement and the diversity life experience perspective essay. I'm going to talk about the elements of both and sort of how they differ so you in your mind can already start thinking big picture, how you will write both of these for you. We're going to talk about best practices, of course, and then if we have any time at the end, we'll have an opportunity to ask questions. Before we get started, and I know that you have been in many sessions today, and I know that you're probably a little bit post-lunch, maybe a little bit tired, if everyone can just take a minute to stretch, just do a little side to side, whatever it is that you might need. I want to respect the fact and acknowledge the fact that you are working very hard and your mind is working very hard today as we are inundating you with information. And one of the things that you can do to make sure that you get the most out of this session is either have your phone out or your notebook out, somewhere where you can take notes and write down any action items or any to-dos that come to your mind when I go through this slide deck with you. There's a lot to think about. There are a lot of really good questions to ask yourself when we get to the brainstorming part. So to prevent you from going home, taking your shoes off, sitting down on the couch, and then thinking, oh gosh, what on goodness's green earth did I do today? You'll have it written down, at least for this session. So I highly encourage you to have a productive session by doing that. Okay, let's go ahead and begin. I want to give you a bird's eye view of what these two statements are and the purpose of them as we kind of go through figuring out what you're going to write about. The personal statement essentially is what introduces you, the voice, the living, breathing human being, the thing that pulses, that's going to sit in the seat. You're the future student that's going to be at that law school. So think about the main characteristics about yourself and what you want admissions to know about you and how you want them to remember you. Okay, this is like your interview that you may not get depending on the school that you apply to. The experience or perspective or diversity statement, think about this as a way of talking about what makes up your identity or your background in your upbringing. How would you sort of define that or explain that in a few short sentences? I want you to think about how those experiences and those perspectives have shaped you into who you are and how you would add diversity of thought, perspective, representation, ideas, experiences, academic knowledge to the classroom and to the legal profession. So think about how those elements have shaped you, who you are, the viewpoints you gathered from that, and how is that going to contribute to your legal experience and your legal education. And I'm going to hone in on the word contribute because it becomes very, very important when we talk about the perspective essay. Okay, so personal statement is your introduction. Who am I? What are the characteristics I want them to know about me? And diversity is how would I define my upbringing and who I am and my identity? How has that perspective affected me or changed the way that I look at the world? And how will I contribute with those perspectives and that background to my law school community? All right, so personal statements, let's deep dive into this. The purpose of this one specifically, and if we really kind of get down to when an application is read and we finally get to the personal statement, and I'll speak for many of my colleagues in admissions, the personal statement is our favorite part of the application, right? The application form will tell us everything that we need to know about you. Your CAS report will tell us all about your grades and your LSAT scores. We'll see what experience you've done in your resume, but it's the statements where we really, really look for your voice and your authentic truth. And it's how we sort of get attached and we'll look back for the students that we really, really care, the applicants that we really care to be there. So this is the part of someone who loves people, as someone who is inspired by those who want to go in the legal profession. I cozy up when I read personal statements. So again, this is an opportunity to select really highly qualified and in total a diverse entering class. It's an opportunity to assess your written English skills and to see how well you would write as a future lawyer. And it really is a great way to get an idea of what you're going to bring to the classroom and to the legal profession. It's a wonderful opportunity for you as the writer to highlight the characteristics and the experiences that you wish to use to tell the story of why you're applying to law school. And bringing me to that point, it's important to assess and be able to articulate what is motivating you and what is the story of stories that brings you to want to apply to law school or to be a lawyer or to get a legal education. This was something that was not necessarily a big thing in the maybe 10 years ago or even 7 years ago, but the more and more the legal profession is requiring students to be a little bit more employment ready, and the more schools are looking at work experience and other experience other than just your undergraduate education, and the more employers want people who know what it is that they want to do, this becomes a huge distinguishing factor in your materials if you can articulate a direction or something that you want to further explore in the law. It doesn't mean that you need to know exactly the kind of lawyer you want to be in the exact type of field within the law, but something in your background, something in your education, something in your experience sparked this interest in wanting to go to law school. Tell them what that story is so they can make a connection point that this is important to you and that you have some sort of internal motivation that will get you through the rigor and the challenges of law school. You need to know why you're there. And again, the personal statement always has to be the original work of the applicant. And again, more and more we are seeing applications coming through with certification and acknowledgement language saying that you're not going to be using generative AI or ChatGPT to write your essays. And to be able to answer that, truthfully, you can't use that. So this really does need to be your original work. Okay, content and topics. What should you include in this, right? At the end of the day, and we will go through some common themes and some ways to brainstorm this, but if we're looking at this sort of from a wide lens and a holistic view, it really should be your authentic, genuine impression of who you are. It really should have your motivations for why you're seeking to go to law school or become an attorney, or what it is that made you interested in the ideas of advocacy or justice or equity or whatever it is that brought you to the law. It really needs to hone in on that motivation because, again, they're looking for people who are going to know the answer when a professor asks them or when a future employer asks them. It may include your interest in a particular law school. And again, some schools will say, why do you want to go to our school specifically in the personal statement? So just watch out for that in the instructions. But some schools will actually give you a separate addendum or an attachment, an optional essay, where you can write an entire statement on why that school specifically. So if you're going to be writing it, Separately, you don't want to duplicate and have it be too much a part of why you're applying to that particular school, but know that you might want in your personal statement a little bit of space to cover that for the schools that specifically ask for it. So again, just read the instructions and make sure that you know what you're answering. Key questions to think about is, what is the story that you wish to tell about yourself that's going to convey something significant about you to the admissions committee, right? What themes or metaphors or experiences represent you best that you can use as a way to tell that story? Formatting. This is just kind of getting the bare bones out before we get into, the substance of how and what to write about. These are generally 2 pages. Schools will give you instructions, and from my experience, when it says 2 to 3 pages or it doesn't give you a page number, err on the side of 2 pages, especially if you are going to have several addenda or other optional essays, because it's really important to realize that the people who are reading your applications are human. They have the attention span of about 2 pages per statement. And if they have to go to a 3rd page and it's not as tight or concise of a full story that you're telling, it might build a little bit of like fatigue or maybe a little resentment, right, at you as the applicant. So err on the side of 2 pages. There are a few schools where it's okay to go a little bit over, but overall, general rule, 2 pages is plenty to be able to convey what you need to in the personal statement. I would stick to 1-inch margins, but 0.75 is also okay. Again, read the instructions. Use a readable font. Times New Roman is great because it's professional, it's readable, and it's still small enough, unlike Arial, where you can fit 11 to 12 point font really, really nicely. I would not use anything creative or anything too hard to read, because again, these people are reading hundreds of applications a week, sometimes up to 40 to 50 a day, and you want to make it easier for them, and you don't want them to, not appreciate the writer for using really, really small font or a hard font to read. Double space, always double space. And for professionalism, add a header to your document. Literally click the top margin of your document and click in that area and put in your legal name or however it's going to show up on your application or in LSAC. Add your LSAC number and the name of the document. So personal statement or optional statement or perspective essay. This will automatically make your document look very professional. It tells them exactly what they're reading, and it doesn't leave them wondering or being curious about, any distractions of what exactly the statement is that they're about to read. Content-wise, authenticity and sincerity are key. This is an opportunity to add a little bit of flair or creative writing. So it doesn't just have to be, this is what happened, this is why I want to go to law school, this is who I am, but you can think of a creative way or a creative narrative or bring them to a moment when something changed for you and reflect back. This is an opportunity to sort of be memorable and be informative while using your voice and showing strategically a little bit of your personality. So if you're typically a very sincere, down-to-earth person, find a sincere, down-to-earth story. If you are more of a person who has dry humor, you can add a little bit of that in here too, right? Obviously, always keep it professional, but again, it's a way for you to show your voice. I don't want you to be too creative to the point where it feels performative. And you'll know for yourself that we all have our own litmus test for that of what feels like us and what doesn't. So to the extent that it can still be your authentic, sincere voice, add a little bit of something to it to make it memorable. It needs to be concise and clear writing. Again, this is going to be an example of the future legal writer that you're going to be. So you want to make sure that you're still using professional writing. Avoid contractions if you can, right? So instead of saying don't, say do not or did not. Unless it's the way that you normally speak, I recommend erring on the side of being more formal in that way. Think about the specific stories and use those specific stories to represent your message, right? Don't just tell, but show the story that you're going to be telling, right? The examples that you're going to be having. And then again, I already mentioned memorable, informative, and in your voice. Common personal statement themes, and these are ones that you can write down as a way to brainstorm a little bit more for yourself. Quite simply, why law? Why are you picking to do this versus social work or being an accountant or being a gardener or being a doctor or being a baker, right? What is the reason for you? And it could be multiple, right? It could be something that you learned about. It could be an experience that you had. It could be, what's going on currently in the world. It could be multiple reasons, but really brainstorm for yourself what made you think, I need to go to law school, right? The other one are personal characteristics. Write down 3 personality traits or adjectives that the closest people to you would describe you as. Is it your strong work ethic? Is it that you're caring? Is it that you are a person who connects really well with people? Is it somebody who has deep faith in people or in things or in their religion? Is it, I'm trying to think of other ones. Is it that you're smart and intelligent, right? Think of the characteristics that really make up who you are, to the point when they leave your statement, what do you want them, or when they finish their application, reading the whole application, what do you want the admissions committee to remember about you? Again, these can be personal characteristics. It can be about your work ethic, right? It can be about the kind of student that you are. Brainstorm a good list of that for yourself. Think of any outside influences in your life. Has something or someone influenced you to be a certain way? Even if it's not the thing to go into law, but is there something that made you the kind of person that you are, or the dedicated student that you are, or a person who went into a certain field or a certain work field, right, that eventually led you to the law? So think about the outside influences, people who influenced you, good, bad, neutral. Learning from mistakes or obstacles overcome is a really, really popular one too. So if there's a way that you can talk about some sort of a learning arc or an obstacle that you had to overcome, and you can show that growth and that dedication and resilience, this is a great way to write about this in your personal statement. It could overlap with something that you would write about in a perspective essay, but maybe not, right? Maybe you have other things to write about in that background experience perspective essay. So think about what you would write for that, and maybe you would use it for the other essay rather than your personal. And then the last one is thinking about the through line in your path to law. And what I mean about that is we can all reflect on our life experiences and all the things that have made us who we are, and all the points on our journey that have brought us to where we are today. Can you go back and kind of reflect on some of those key points that maybe were instrumental in leading you to the next path and to the next patch and to the next part that eventually brought you now to the application process? And then tell that story, right? Sometimes it starts in childhood and it goes all the way to now. Sometimes it's something that happens in college, something that happens later. It's different for everyone, but give that story of the through line to your path to law. Some other brainstorming ideas, and again, if it's too hard to write all of these, you're more than welcome to take out your phone and snap a picture of it if that's easier. Brainstorm and finish these sentences. I am. Who are you? What are you? Where are you? Right? Jot down some of your top life experiences, personal, academic, and maybe outside of that, professional. Write down some of the goals that you have achieved, and maybe some of the goals that you're still working towards. Reflect on some of the hardships or the adversities that you've experienced, and how has it brought you to where you are today. Think about any rare or special qualities that you possess, or any sort of interesting facts about you that people would be surprised to learn about you at a barbecue, right? My favorite one, the moment that changed everything, right? Was there a moment for you where everything changed and it led you on a trajectory to pursue law? I started feeling differently about X topic when, and tell us what happened. I felt most proud of myself when, I find myself thinking most deeply about the biggest mistake I ever made, which hopefully you turn into a lesson, right, rather than a failure. And then simply, I want to study law because. And if you're honest with yourself and you allow yourself the opportunity to just write sort of in a stream of consciousness, not for an essay, not for anyone to read, but just whatever comes to mind in your voice with grammar mistakes and whatever, don't punctuate, however you want to write, get it out on paper, and then you can look at what you have and figure out what comes to you. Okay? I think it's helpful to hear some examples. And so this is a breakdown of some of the most memorable themes and examples of personal statements that former clients of mine have written about. We also have on the Spivey blog excellent examples of personal statements and life experience perspective essays. I'm sure you can search the internet for all sorts of versions of them, but the ones at least on our website I can verify have been successful and have helped people sort of punch above their numbers compared to the medians of the schools for whatever reason. And so we annotate them, we kind of say what was good about them, and they're just great examples to be able to look at. One caveat to that is other people's personalities, voices, experiences, and life stories will inevitably be different from your own. So look at them truly as just examples and not templates for yourself, because you will be sorely disappointed. It won't necessarily fit for you, but it might give you ideas as to how to write your own, and that's perfectly fine. Okay. So I had a client who used the mechanism of symbols. They talked about the night before going to start their senior year of college, they were packing to take with them 3 items. In each of those 3 random items in their room, one was like a medal from a dance competition in her youth. One was a note scribbled on, a ripped piece of paper. And then the other one was, oh gosh, I totally forgot what the other one was. Something else, right? And they each symbolized things in their life that made an impact on them. So the ripped paper was a note from their grandmother, and because of the history and the life that her grandmother lived, she was really inspiring to her in a certain way. And the dance competition medal was a way that she kind of came out of her shell and allowed herself to connect with people from all different backgrounds for the love of dance, and how that freedom of expression gave her so much confidence. And then I don't remember what the third one was, but each one was sort of this idea of shaping the kind of person that she is and who she brings to the law school community. And she ended with saying, like, I zipped up my backpack, or I zipped up my luggage, ready to start, my senior year, and I can't wait to see what that'll bring to law school, right? Metaphors. I had a client who was a former physical therapist, and her whole goal with her patients was to figure out what they wanted to accomplish physically with their body in the time that they were with her. And so she starts the story saying, I was in my office when all of a sudden I heard that familiar pop of cellophane, and this wafting air of cheesy Nirvana entered my office, and I couldn't help but smile. And that wording of cheesy Nirvana will never leave my mind because it's brilliant, right? And she goes to say that her patient was able to pop open a bag of Cheetos because he had some sort of a condition with his hands that didn't give him the strength, the muscle strength to do that. And her whole story was talking about how she fought so hard with insurance, off hours from her patients, to get this patient extra care, that she learned all about the healthcare system and all about the limitations with insurance. And she realized, I can make such an impact for more patients, not one-on-one, but more. And then at the end, she said, my goal, like my bag of Cheetos, is to get my law degree to make, a difference in so many more people's lives. So bag of Cheetos as a metaphor. You can use the idea of bookends. I had a client who, because of her family situation, was in family court all the time as a child. And she sort of started the story with sitting in these big chairs and not knowing exactly what was going on, and sort of the helplessness that she felt. And it brought her to want to care about people and study psychology and go into some sort of social work or therapy work that she did, ultimately wanting to go into family law to represent families and children in dependency courts, reclaiming the courtroom as a place where now she doesn't have to feel helpless and she can help other people not feel helpless. So it was the courtroom in the beginning, all the way to this arc of empowerment to courtroom at the end. A formative event. I had a client who was an avid dancer, broke her ankle on stage, and the whole first paragraph was how she got up and danced anyway through the break because, well, can you break your ankle? Sprained. I'm sorry, I need to correct that. She sprained her ankle. And she was talking about what she learned in the fortitude of never giving up and how hard it was for her to do that. And she sort of used that as an example of getting through some tough times in college and changing her major, and ultimately brought it to, I will bring that dedication, resilience, and I will never give up, right, on my clients and moving forward in law school. I had another client who worked very, very closely with refugee communities and essentially wanted to go to be an asylum attorney and work with refugee communities. But her entry story or her introductory story was wading in the waters in Greece, knee deep at night, actually helping refugees out of the boats and helping them to land and being the first person that they saw and gave them like a smile of relief and walked them to the triage tent where they can be checked out and they can be looked at. And she used that as a story to sort of say why it's important for her to do the area of law that she wants to go into and what she learned from those experiences and some of the humbling experiences that she had in providing sort of grassroots assistance, and helped that be the defining point to the kind of lawyer that she's going to be. So again, bringing them straight into the story in the very beginning to sort of capture and compel the reader. And then lastly, the common thread or that through line. I had a client who studied philosophy and realized that everything that he's ever done from childhood and the way he interacted with his family to pursuing, one sort of activity in his youth to the work that he did to becoming a teacher to now going into law school was that he always was in the pursuit of truth in his life. And so as he told these little vignettes of his life, the pursuit of truth was always there and landed beautifully with the way that he said, ultimately, why I want to go into law school is for the pursuit of truth. And obviously, it was a little bit more detailed than that. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of ideas. It shows you that you can kind of think outside of the box. These were all super memorable for me, and I read hundreds of these, but admissions reads thousands in every cycle. And so if it's memorable for them and they can build affinity towards the writer, you have done your job in making sure that they remember you and your story, right? Okay, so as you start thinking about this, put yourself in the mind frame of a storyteller, right? You need to captivate the readers. You have to be authentic and true to yourself first and foremost, right? But there needs to be some element that's captivating, right? You are, in essence, trying to distinguish yourself from everybody else who's applying. And so figure out a way that you can do that that's still true to you. In saying that, though, avoid overly long or compound sentences and use active voice. If you are unfamiliar or you have forgotten what that grammatical term means, active versus passive voice, add that to your to-do list of Googling it really quickly. It's a super easy, very simple concept, and you would not be surprised how many people speak in passive voice, and you elevate your essays right away if it's an active voice. So give yourself that little 5-minute grammar lesson should you need it. Keep it about you. It can't be too much about anybody else, even if you're talking about folks who have been inspired or influenced, right? Have influenced you. And of course, be yourself. Everyone else is already taken. Touch on your identity and your background if that makes sense to you, but also speak about other aspects of who you are and the influence on your life that won't be covered in your life experience essay. And again, we'll talk about that in a minute, but just keep that in mind that you don't want to duplicate stories or too much information because you're getting 2 bites out of the apple to tell more about yourself. Why not use the space to talk about different things, right? I highly recommend brainstorming first and outlining a little bit about what you want to do to get organized before you start writing. And the reason for that is because the personal statement is one of at least 2 essays, if not 3 or 4, that may be a part of your application process. And so if you put too much in one essay, and you're not thinking about what would fit in the others, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage in your writing, or you're making your work harder for yourself because you're going to have to go back and adjust and fix, right? So brainstorm first, think about all the essays that are going to be a part of your application process, and then figure out what stories you want to tell in each, what aspects of your life you want to tell in each, and then you can start writing them with the confidence and the security, knowing that everything is going to be covered at the end of the day. Lastly, and I think this is one of the best things to think about, is at the end of the day, when an admissions reader is done with your application, what do you want them to take away about you and your path to law after reading your essay? So if they put it down after getting to the last page and they were to say, okay, this applicant in a sentence is the physical therapist, bag of Cheetos, wants to go into healthcare law, has a really solid path to it, and was diligent the whole time, right? Or this was the person who was a dancer and never gave up, right? Wants to go into law to do whatever, right? Think of how you want them to think about you so you can backtrack after you have your draft to ensure that that's clear, right? In the way you've demonstrated your experiences and the way you talk about yourself. Before I hop to experience and perspective diversity essays, there is a huge element of when somebody is reading your application, and I'll go back to this real quick, that you can reflect and be self-actualized. Emotional maturity and EQ is so important. And it's really, really hard to be able to convey that in your application. A really great way of doing that is to reflect back on experiences and talk about what you've learned and maybe the growth mindset or the empowerment that you got from what you learned, or the humility of what you learned if it's talking about a mistake. Things like, I recognize that, or it was hard for me to acknowledge that, or in reflecting on this experience, this is what I learned, right? Or I bring with me this thing that I understood about myself. Using language like that shows a reader, oh wow, it's not just a bunch of random things that happen in this person's life, but this person is actually thinking about and affecting what they're doing next based on what they have learned or what they've experienced. So that's a kind of an easier way and a more concise way of being able to show those reflection points rather than just stating what happened or moving on quickly from something, right? So hopefully that's helpful in infusing some of your self-actualization and your maturity and your emotional capacity, right, to your statements. Okay, how are we doing on time? We're good. I'm gonna fly through this. Okay, a brief history on experience and perspective essays. Back in the day, diversity statements were asked as optional statements. Nobody had to submit a diversity statement, but it was there for people to be able to talk about what their backgrounds, their experiences, their race, their ethnicity, adversities that they experienced, other types of identities, right, that have been historically discriminated against or left out of the legal profession, were not representative of the legal profession. They could bring those up and talk about them. The tides have changed, right, and the current situation is that there is no ability after the 2023 Supreme Court decision on race-conscious admissions to be able to factor in race or ethnicity as a part of the admissions decision. What I don't want anyone to think about is that schools still do not want a diverse population of people, because different perspectives, thoughts, backgrounds, and representation only enlightens and makes your educational experience that much richer and that much more representative of the society that you will be representing. So it's not that schools do not want this information, it's just now they have to be very careful of how they ask. So in that decision, the SFFA versus Harvard, Chief Justice John Roberts wrote in his opinion a caveat to how applicants can still speak about their diversity, their background, and their experiences in their applications that schools can listen to and can take into consideration. So nothing prohibits universities from considering an applicant's discussion of how race, background, ethnicity, right, affected the applicant's life, so long as that discussion is concretely tied to the quality of character or unique ability that that particular applicant can contribute to the university. I should have underlined that, highlighted it, made it blink. Contribute is the biggest word there, right? So bottom line, schools still care. They just can't ask about it in the same way, but you as the applicant are still allowed to tell them. And what this means now is these statements are no longer called